The wail of a child pierced the crisp autumn air as Faith Norwood sank to her knees on the riverbank, her calloused hands clutching a worn leather pouch containing the last of her meager savings. Colorado Territory, 1875, had shown her nothing but cruelty since her husband's passing 3 months prior. And now, with 5 hungry children and not a penny to spare for tomorrow's bread, she had reached the breaking point. The rushing waters of the Eagle River carried her tears away as quickly as she shed them, her shoulders quaking with each silent sob. Samuel Ryder pulled back on his horse's reins when he heard the sound of weeping. He'd been following the river trail back to town after a long cattle drive, his body aching for a hot bath and a soft bed. But something in the desperate, broken sounds tugging at his weathered heart made him dismount instead. Tethering his dun stallion to a nearby cottonwood, he adjusted his worn Stetson and approached the scene with quiet caution. What he found was a slender woman dressed in faded calico, her auburn hair falling loose from its pins, with 5 small children huddled nearby. The oldest couldn't have been more than 11, standing protectively near the youngest, a babe barely old enough to walk. Their clothes were clean but patched many times over, their faces pinched with hunger but scrubbed clean. "Madam," Samuel spoke softly, keeping a respectful distance. "Forgive the intrusion, but is there something I might help with?" Faith startled, quickly wiping her tears and pulling her youngest close to her skirts. "We want no charity, sir," she said with as much dignity as she could muster, though her voice quavered. Samuel nodded, understanding pride when he saw it. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, his face tanned and lined from sun and wind, but his blue eyes remained kind. "No charity offered, madam, just a fellow traveler wondering if you might need assistance." The oldest boy with hair the same rich auburn as his mother's stepped forward. "Our pa died," he declared, chin jutting out defiantly. "Fever took him. Ma says we're going to be fine," but his voice caught, betraying his brave facade. "Frederick," Faith admonished gently, then sighed. "My apologies, sir. We're just having a difficult moment. We'll be on our way." But as she attempted to stand, Samuel noticed her wince. "You're hurt," he observed. "It's nothing, just a turned ankle from the walk into town." She gathered the toddler into her arms. "Children, come along now." Samuel glanced at the 5 youngsters, the protective eldest boy, twin girls of about 9 who clung to each other, a solemn boy of perhaps 5, and the toddler in Faith's arms. All looked exhausted. "Town's still 4 miles, Samuel said quietly, "and the sun's getting low. My horse can't carry all of you, but I've got a camp set up just around the bend. Clean water, a fire already built, and rabbit stew that'll stretch. No strings attached. Just a meal and safe rest before you continue tomorrow." Faith hesitated, torn between stubborn independence and practical necessity. The smallest child whimpered and she closed her eyes briefly. "We can pay our way," she insisted. "I can cook, mend, wash. Let's just get you all fed first," Samuel interrupted gently. "Then we can discuss fair exchange if you insist." He knelt down to be eye level with the children. "My name's Samuel Ryder. Most folks call me Sam. I've been a rancher hereabouts for 15 years. The twins exchanged glances before one whispered, "I'm Lillian," followed by her sister's barely audible, "I'm Louisa." "Fine names," Sam said with a genuine smile. "And who might the rest of you be?" "I'm Frederick," the oldest repeated. "That's Daniel, and the baby is Charlotte." Faith watched the interaction cautiously before finally introducing herself. "I'm Faith Norwood, my husband," her voice caught. "We had a small farm near Silverton. After James passed, we couldn't keep up with the work or the payments." Sam nodded, not pressing for details. "Well, Mrs. Norwood, my camp's just yonder. I can carry the little ones if they're tired." To Faith's surprise, Frederick allowed Sam to hoist Daniel onto his shoulders, while the twins decided they were certainly not too tired to walk. Faith carried Charlotte, and Sam, without comment, shortened his stride to match her limping pace. The camp was indeed just around the river bend, nestled in a copse of aspens whose golden leaves shimmered in the evening light. A small fire crackled merrily, and a pot of stew bubbled over the flames, filling the air with savory aromas that made the children's eyes widen. "It's not fancy," Sam apologized, "but it's hot and filling." Faith felt tears threatening again at this simple kindness but swallowed them back. "Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Sam, please." He busied himself ladling stew into tin cups, the only vessels he had, and tearing a loaf of bread into portions. Been on the trail 3 weeks, bringing cattle down from the high country before winter sets in. The children ate ravenously, but with manners that spoke of good raising. Faith took small bites, seeming more concerned with ensuring her children had enough than satisfying her own hunger. Sam pretended not to notice when she slipped portions of her meal onto Daniel's plate when the boy looked longingly at the pot. As darkness fell, Sam built up the fire and unrolled his bedroll for the children. "I've slept under the stars more nights than I can count," he insisted when Faith protested. "Tonight's no different." When the children finally slept, exhaustion claiming even Frederick's vigilance, Faith sat by the fire, her hands busy mending a tear in Charlotte's dress by firelight. Sam settled quietly across from her. "May I ask where you're headed, Mrs. Norwood?" "Faith," she corrected softly, not looking up from her work. "I have a cousin in Denver who might take us in until I can find proper work. I was a school teacher before I married. That's a fair distance yet." "Yes," her needle stilled. "I had hoped to save enough for stage passage, but prices were higher than I remembered. We'll walk. We've managed this far." Sam gazed at the sleeping children. "That's rough country for little ones, especially with winter coming on." Faith's chin lifted. "We'll manage." "No doubt," Sam agreed, "but there might be a better way." She eyed him suspiciously. "What way would that be, Mr. Ryder? I'm headed to Eagle Station myself to collect payment for the cattle. From there, I'll be returning to my ranch about 15 miles north of there. It's a modest spread, but I've been looking to hire help since my foreman left to stake his own claim last spring." Faith's eyes narrowed. "What sort of help?" "The house needs tending," Sam said carefully, "and I've been thinking the place could use a proper garden come spring. The neighboring ranch has children about your Frederick's age who could use a proper education. Mrs. Wilson tries her best, but she's no teacher." "You're offering employment," Faith clarified, her tone guarded. Sam nodded. "Room and board for you and your children, plus fair wages." The old foreman's cabin is sitting empty. It's small but sound, with 2 rooms and a good stove. If you're inclined toward teaching, I suspect the neighbors would pay for schooling. "Why would you do this? You don't know us." Sam poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. "I came west with nothing but the clothes on my back and a stubborn streak wider than the Mississippi. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it. Seems only right to do the same." Faith studied him in the flickering light. He had kind eyes, she decided, set in a face weathered by sun and hard work. There was no deception there, only a straightforward offer. "I'll consider it," she said finally, "but I make no promises." Sam nodded. "Fair enough." The next morning, after a breakfast of cornmeal mush sweetened with the last of Sam's molasses, they broke camp. Sam insisted on Faith riding his horse with Charlotte in her arms while he led the animal on foot. The other children walked alongside, Frederick helping the twins over rough spots in the trail, Daniel trotting to keep up with Sam's long strides. They reached Eagle Station by midday, a bustling settlement that served as a supply point for the surrounding ranches and mining operations. Faith tensed visibly as they entered town, her eyes darting from building to building. "Something wrong?" Sam asked quietly. Faith hesitated. James had debts, men who might still be looking to collect. Sam's expression hardened slightly. "What kind of debts?" "Gambling," Faith admitted, shame coloring her voice. "He was a good man in many ways, but weak when it came to cards. I didn't know how bad it had gotten until after he passed." Sam nodded, understanding more about her desperate situation. "Well, best we keep a low profile then. I need to see the cattle buyer and collect my payment. Would you and the children prefer to wait at the general store? Mrs. Peterson, who runs it, is a kind soul." Relief washed over Faith's face. "That would be best, I think." Mrs. Peterson indeed proved to be a kindly woman who took one look at the travel-worn children and immediately offered them each a peppermint stick, on account, with a wink at Faith that suggested no payment would ever be required. While the children savored their rare treats, Faith browsed the store's offerings, mentally calculating what supplies they would need if they continued to Denver, and how impossibly far her remaining money would stretch. Sam returned quicker than expected, his expression grim. "What is it?" Faith asked, immediately alarmed. "Perhaps we should step outside," Sam suggested, glancing meaningfully at the children. Once on the store's porch, Sam spoke in low tones. "I overheard some talk at the cattle buyer's office. There's a man asking after a widow with 5 children headed to Denver. Goes by the name of Harlow. Ring any bells?" Faith's face drained of color. "Victor Harlow, he's the one James owed the most to. He runs the saloon in Silverton and other enterprises less savory." "How much was the debt?" Sam asked. $300, Faith whispered. "James put our farm up as collateral without my knowledge. After he died, Harlow said I could work it off in his establishment." Her voice hardened. "I took the children and left that night." Sam's jaw tightened. "I see." "He'll take everything if he finds us," Faith continued, her voice shaking. "The children, he won't find you," Sam interrupted firmly. "My offer stands. My ranch is far enough from town and the main roads that you'd be safe there." Harlow sounds like the type who wouldn't waste time searching the backcountry for long. Faith hesitated only briefly before nodding. "We accept your offer, Mr. Ryder. For now, at least." Sam's relief was evident. "Good, we'll need supplies then. Let me settle up with Mrs. Peterson." By mid-afternoon, they had loaded a rented wagon with basic provisions: flour, sugar, coffee, beans, and salt, along with a few necessities for the children. Sam had quietly added warm blankets, a set of tin plates and cups, and a small rag doll that Charlotte had been unable to take her eyes off. Faith protested the expenditure, but Sam waved her concerns away. "Consider it an advance on wages. The ranch has been profitable this season, and these things you'll need regardless." They left town just as the church bell struck 4, taking a less traveled road that wound north through stands of pine and aspen. The twins had fallen asleep against sacks of flour in the wagon bed. Daniel was fighting to keep his eyes open, and even Frederick's vigilant posture had relaxed somewhat. Charlotte dozed in Faith's arms on the wagon seat beside Sam, who handled the team of horses with easy confidence. "How far is your ranch?" Faith asked, breaking a comfortable silence that had settled between them. "We'll need to make camp tonight," Sam replied. "Should reach the Broken R by tomorrow afternoon. That's what I call my place, the Broken R Ranch." "Why broken?" Sam chuckled. "Started as a joke. When I first staked my claim, all I could afford was a broken-down cabin and one ancient cow. My brand's just an R with a crack through it. Name stuck, even after things improved." Faith smiled despite her exhaustion. "How did a single cow become a cattle ranch?" "Luck, hard work, and a few strays that nobody claimed during a bad winter," Sam admitted. "Plus a knack for knowing which yearlings would grow strong. Took nearly 10 years before I could call it a proper ranch, though." They made camp as dusk fell, finding a sheltered hollow near a small creek. This time, Faith insisted on cooking, using the fresh supplies to prepare a stew that had the children scraping their plates clean and Sam declaring it the best meal he'd had in months. Later, with the children asleep in the wagon and the fire burning low, Faith found herself sharing more of her story with this quiet man who'd shown such unexpected kindness. "James wasn't always reckless," she explained, staring into the flames. "When we married, he had such dreams for our farm. He worked from dawn until dusk those first years, but after Daniel was born, there were complications. The doctor said there could be no more children." She swallowed hard. "Something changed in him then. He started going to town more often, coming home later." When Charlotte arrived on our doorstep, "Charlotte isn't yours," Sam asked gently. Faith smiled sadly. "She is in every way that matters. She's James's child, that much is clear from her looks, but her mother was a young woman from the saloon. She died in childbirth, and James brought the baby home full of remorse and promises to change. I couldn't turn away an innocent child." Her voice softened. "And I loved her from the moment I saw her." Sam was quiet for a long moment. "That speaks to your character, Faith." "Or my foolishness," she replied with a touch of bitterness. "James tried for a time, but the lure of cards and whiskey proved too strong. By the time he fell ill with fever last winter, we were already losing the farm. His death only hastened the inevitable. You've carried a heavy burden, Sam observed, and carried it well from what I can see. Your children are well-mannered and close-knit. They're all I have, Faith said simply. All that matters. The next day dawned clear and cool, promising fair travel. The children were in better spirits after a night of proper rest and full stomachs. Even Frederick seemed less wary, helping Sam harness the team while peppering him with questions about ranch life. They traveled steadily through the morning, the terrain gradually changing from flat plains to rolling foothills dotted with pine. Shortly after their midday meal, Sam pointed to a distant line of smoke rising against the mountains. There it is, the Broken R. As they drew closer, Faith could make out a modest but well-maintained ranch house built of sturdy logs, a large barn, several outbuildings, and corrals containing horses and cattle. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwoods that had turned golden with autumn's touch. "It's lovely," Faith breathed, surprised by the peacefulness of the scene. Sam's expression warmed with pride. "It's not grand, but it's home." As they approached the main house, a grizzled older man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He raised a hand in greeting. "That's Emmett," Sam explained. "Been with me almost from the beginning. Handles the horses mostly, doesn't say much, but there's no better judge of horseflesh in the territory." Emmett's bushy eyebrows rose at the sight of a woman and 5 children, but he merely nodded a greeting and approached to help with the team. "Brought company, I see," he commented, his voice raspy from years of tobacco. "This is Mrs. Norwood and her children," Sam replied. "They'll be staying in the foreman's cabin. Mrs. Norwood's going to help with the house and possibly start a school." Emmett absorbed this information with another nod. "Cabin needs airing out, been closed up since Jenkins left. We'll see to it," Sam assured him. The foreman's cabin stood about 50 yards from the main house, a simple structure with a covered porch and a stone chimney. Inside, Faith found it dusty but sound, with 2 rooms separated by a curtain. A cast iron stove dominated one corner, and basic furniture, a table, chairs, a bed frame, and a chest remained from the previous occupant. "It needs work," Sam acknowledged as Faith surveyed the space. "But the roof doesn't leak, and the stove draws well." "It's perfect," Faith said softly, watching as the twins immediately began exploring every corner while Daniel tried to peek through the shuttered windows. Sam cleared his throat. "I should let you get settled. There's a well behind the cabin with good water. I'll bring over some bedding from the main house. We can discuss your duties and wages over supper if that suits." Faith turned to him, suddenly overwhelmed by the day's events. "Mr. Ryder, Sam, I don't know how to thank you." "No thanks needed," he replied gruffly. "It's a fair exchange. This place has needed a woman's touch for too long." He paused at the door. "Supper's at 6. Nothing fancy, but you're all welcome at the main house until you're properly set up here." The next few days passed in a flurry of activity as Faith transformed the dusty cabin into a home. Sam provided mattresses stuffed with clean straw, and Faith used fabric purchased in town to sew curtains for the windows, and a divider to create a sleeping area for herself separate from the children. Frederick and Daniel took to ranch life with enthusiasm, following Emmett around and learning about horses. The twins appointed themselves keepers of the cabin, sweeping and scrubbing until the rough plank floors gleamed, while Charlotte toddled after whoever would let her follow. Faith divided her time between caring for her children and helping at the main house as agreed. Sam's home, she discovered, was comfortable but neglected, with bachelor simplicity throughout. She began by tackling the kitchen, organizing pantry stores and scouring cookware that had seen haphazard cleaning at best. "You don't need to transform the place overnight," Sam commented on the 3rd day, finding Faith up to her elbows in soap suds as she washed neglected curtains. "I like keeping busy," she replied. "It helps me think." Sam leaned against the doorframe. "And what are you thinking about, if I may ask?" Faith wrung out the dripping fabric. "How to make this arrangement work? The children need schooling." "I was thinking perhaps 3 mornings a week. I could teach them and any neighboring children. The afternoons I could spend here and evenings with my own family." "Sounds reasonable," Sam agreed. The Wilsons have 3 children and the Thorntons too, all within riding distance. I'm sure they'd be interested. Would you mind if I used your front room as a schoolroom until something more suitable can be arranged? The cabin is too small for additional children. Of course not. This house has been too empty for too long. Faith glanced up, catching something in his tone. Have you never married, Sam? A shadow crossed his face. Once, a long time ago, Caroline died in childbirth our first year here, the baby too. I'm so sorry, Faith said softly, understanding now his immediate sympathy for her situation. Sam shook his head as if clearing away old ghosts. It was 15 years ago. I threw myself into building the ranch after that, easier than dwelling on what couldn't be changed. Their conversation was interrupted by Frederick's excited arrival, bursting through the back door with news that Emmett had promised to teach him to ride. Only if your mother approves, Sam cautioned, looking to Faith. She nodded, unable to deny her son's shining eyes. Just be careful, Frederick. As autumn deepened into winter, a routine developed at the Broken R. True to her word, Faith established a school that met 3 mornings a week, attended by her own children and 5 others from neighboring ranches. The front room of Sam's house transformed into a classroom, with a blackboard Sam ordered specially from Denver and benches he and Emmett built themselves. The neighboring families paid what they could, sometimes in cash, often in goods like preserves, smoked meats, or hand-knit items for Faith's children. News of the school spread, and by December, 3 more children joined their ranks, including a shy girl of 12 whose father worked in the silver mine 10 miles distant and rode her in on his way to work. Faith found herself busier than she'd been in years, but also more content. Her children were thriving. Frederick had become Emmett's shadow, learning ranching skills with single-minded focus. The twins had made friends with the Wilson girls and spent hours creating elaborate make-believe worlds. Daniel had overcome his initial shyness and revealed a quick mind for numbers. And little Charlotte charmed everyone she met, following Sam with particular devotion whenever he was near. Sam watched the transformation of his home with quiet satisfaction. The main house, once simply a place to sleep and eat between work, had become a center of activity and learning. Faith's touch was evident everywhere, from the fresh curtains at the windows to the carefully tended fire that always welcomed him at day's end. He found himself lingering over supper discussions, genuinely interested in Frederick's latest riding achievement or the twins' newest discovery. He started carving small wooden animals for the children in the evenings, beginning with a horse for Frederick that was received with such wide-eyed wonder that Sam immediately started on a matching pair for the twins. What surprised him most, however, was how much he enjoyed Faith's company. She was intelligent and well-read, often challenging his opinions on everything from cattle breeding to politics. Her quiet strength impressed him, the way she managed her growing duties without complaint, how she maintained firm but loving discipline with her children, the dignity with which she faced each day despite the circumstances that had brought her to his door. For Faith, the feelings developing for Sam caught her entirely off guard. She had married James young, swept away by his charm and big dreams. Their marriage had its tender moments, especially in the early years, but as James's weaknesses emerged, Faith had found herself more mother than wife, managing his moods and cleaning up his messes. Sam was different, steady, dependable, a man whose word was his bond. She noticed the small kindnesses he performed without drawing attention to them. The way he always made sure her cabin had ample firewood stocked before she even realized it was running low. How he found reasons to take Frederick along on short rides, giving the boy the male attention he clearly craved. The wooden cradle he'd somehow found time to craft for Charlotte when he noticed her outgrowing the dresser drawer where she'd been sleeping. As Christmas approached, Faith worried about having nothing to give her children. Their situation had improved tremendously. They had a roof, food, warmth, and safety, but there was precious little extra for presents. She'd been saving her wages carefully, but most had gone toward winter boots for the rapidly growing children. One evening, after the children were asleep, Faith sat by her cabin's fire, piecing together a rag doll for Charlotte from scraps of fabric. A knock at the door startled her. Sam stood on the porch, snowflakes dusting his broad shoulders and hat. "Sorry to disturb you so late," he said. "May I come in for a moment?" Faith nodded, quickly setting aside her sewing. "Of course. Would you like coffee? The stove's still hot." "No, thank you." Sam remained standing, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "I wanted to ask. That is, I was wondering if you and the children would consider spending Christmas Day at the main house. Emmett's sister is visiting from Leadville, and I thought we might have a proper celebration." Faith smiled. "That would be lovely. I'll bring a pie or two. There's something else." Sam reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small drawstring bag. "The cattle payment came in higher than expected this year. I want you to have this." Faith accepted the bag cautiously, opening it to find several silver dollars more money than she'd held at once in over a year. "Sam, I can't, it's not charity," he interrupted gently. "It's your due share. The school's bringing in families from further out, families who might do business with the Broken R instead of riding all the way to Eagle Station. And the house hasn't run this smoothly in years." Tears pricked at Faith's eyes. "Thank you. The children will have Christmas after all." Sam shifted his weight, still awkward. "There's a trader coming through tomorrow with his wagon. He usually has toys and such. I thought you might want to know." Faith impulsively reached out and squeezed his hand. "You're a good man, Samuel Ryder." He cleared his throat, nodding once before retreating into the snowy night. Christmas Day dawned clear and bright, the landscape transformed into a glistening white wonderland. Faith had used the trader's visit to purchase small treasures for each child: a carved wooden whistle for Frederick, hair ribbons for the twins, a picture book for Daniel, and a tiny china-headed doll for Charlotte that had cost nearly half of Sam's gift, but was worth every penny for the joy it would bring. For Sam, she had agonized before finally embroidering a handkerchief with his initials, a simple gift, but one crafted with care. For Emmett, she'd baked his favorite molasses cookies and wrapped them in a clean cloth tied with string. The celebration at the main house exceeded her expectations. Sam had somehow procured a small pine tree, which the children had decorated with strings of dried berries and paper chains. Emmett's sister Martha proved to be a jolly woman with a booming laugh who immediately took charge of the kitchen, allowing Faith to simply enjoy the day. After a dinner of roast goose, potatoes, and 3 kinds of pie, they gathered around the fireplace for the exchange of gifts. The children's delight at their simple presence warmed Faith's heart, but it was Sam's reaction to his handkerchief that caught her by surprise. "This is fine work," he said softly, running his thumb over the stitched initials. "I haven't had anything with my name on it since." He stopped, swallowing hard. "Thank you, Faith." "It's nothing compared to all you've done for us," she replied, suddenly shy under his intense gaze. Sam cleared his throat and reached behind his chair, producing 5 wrapped packages. "I hope you don't mind," he said to Faith. "I got a little something for each of the children." Frederick received a small pocket knife that made him stand taller with pride. The twins each got illustrated books of fairy tales that left them wide-eyed. Daniel's gift was a set of carved wooden animals that he immediately began arranging in lifelike scenes, and Charlotte received a tiny silver locket on a ribbon to keep a picture of her mother, Sam explained. When the children had scampered off to play with their treasures, Sam handed Faith a final package. "You didn't need to get me anything," she protested. "Open it," he urged gently. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal and a fountain pen. "I remember you mentioning you used to keep a journal before life got too hectic," Sam explained. "Thought you might like to start again." Faith touched the smooth leather cover reverently. "It's perfect, thank you." As winter settled deeply over the Colorado mountains, life at the Broken R fell into a comfortable rhythm. The school continued, despite occasional snow days when travel was impossible. Faith's teaching brought modest income, but immense satisfaction, as she watched her students, including her own children, thrive under her guidance. Sam found more reasons to be around the main house during school hours, ostensibly checking his ledgers or repairing tack by the fire, but increasingly drawn to the sight of Faith in her element. She transformed when teaching, her quiet dignity giving way to animated enthusiasm that captivated her students and him. One evening in late January, after the children were asleep, Faith sat writing in her journal by lamplight when a knock came at her cabin door. She opened it to find Sam, his expression grave. "What is it?" she asked, immediately concerned. "May I come in?" At her nod, he stepped inside, removing his hat. "I've had news from town. Victor Harlow's been asking questions again, offering rewards for information about your whereabouts." Faith's hand flew to her throat. "How did he find out we're in this area?" "He hasn't specifically, but he's widened his search." Sam's jaw tightened. "Faith, the man's persistent beyond reason. $300 is a large sum, but not worth this manhunt." "It's not just the money," Faith said softly. "It's pride. James humiliated him at cards once before his luck turned, and she faltered. "You what?" Sam prompted gently. "I refused his advances after James died, quite publicly. Men like Harlow don't forget such insults." Sam's expression darkened. "I see. What should we do?" Fear crept into Faith's voice. "We can't keep hiding forever." Sam paced the small room, considering. The territorial courts might help, but proving harassment is difficult without witnesses willing to testify. He stopped abruptly. "There's another possibility, but—" He shook his head. "What is it?" "It's not my place to suggest such a thing." Faith stepped closer. "Sam, please, whatever it is, I need to know my options." He met her eyes. "If you were married, Harlow would have no legal claim on you or your property. Debts of a previous husband wouldn't transfer." Faith's breath caught. "Are you proposing marriage?" "As a practical solution," Sam clarified quickly, though color rose in his face. "It would protect you legally. Nothing would have to change in our arrangements otherwise." Faith studied him in the lamplight, this man who had become so central to their lives. "A marriage of convenience," she said slowly. "Exactly." Sam looked away. "You should know I'm offering this with no expectations beyond what we've already established. Your cabin would remain yours." "I wouldn't presume, Sam," Faith interrupted gently. "Do you want to marry me solely for practical reasons?" He was silent for a long moment. "No," he finally admitted, his voice rough. "Not solely." The confession hung between them, changing everything and nothing all at once. "I need time to think," Faith said quietly. Sam nodded, reaching for the door. "Of course. Good night, Faith." After he left, Faith sat for hours by the dying fire, weighing possibilities and examining her own heart. James had been dead just over half a year. Was it disloyal to consider remarrying so soon? Yet her marriage had effectively ended long before James's final breath, and her children needed security more than she needed to observe conventional mourning periods. And then there was Sam himself, steady, honorable Sam, who treated her with a respect James had rarely shown, who saw her children as blessings rather than burdens. Did she love him? The question kept her awake far into the night. The next morning, after sending the children to the main house for breakfast before school, Faith walked to the creek. The winter sun glinted off the partially frozen surface, creating a mosaic of ice and flowing water. She found a boulder sheltered from the wind and sat, pulling her shawl tighter against the cold. This was where Sam found her an hour later, her cheeks flushed from the cold but her eyes clear and determined. "Frederick said you hadn't come to the house," he explained, approaching cautiously. "I was worried." Faith patted the space beside her on the rock. "I needed to think." Sam hesitated before sitting, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "And have you thought, I mean?" "Yes." Faith turned to face him. "Before I give you my answer, I need to know something. If Harlow weren't a threat, would you still want to marry me?" Sam's gaze never wavered. "Yes." "Why?" "Because in all my years since Caroline, I never thought I'd want a family again." His voice was low but steady. "Until you and your children arrived. Because Frederick makes me proud as any son could. Because the twins make me laugh. Because Daniel reminds me to see the world with wonder. Because Charlotte's little hand in mine makes everything right." He paused. "And because you, Faith Norwood, are the strongest, kindest woman I've ever known, and I find myself thinking about you first thing each morning and last thing each night." Tears sprang to Faith's eyes. "That sounds remarkably like love, Sam Ryder." "It is," he acknowledged simply. "Though I didn't mean to burden you with it so soon." Faith reached for his hand. It's not a burden, and yes, I will marry you not just for protection or practicality, but because I believe we could build something true together. Sam's fingers tightened around hers. I won't rush you, Faith. We can have a long engagement if you prefer, she shook her head. Harlow aside, I don't see the point in waiting. The children already look to you as a father figure, and she smiled shyly. I find I'm rather impatient to begin our life together properly. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the parlor of the main house, with Reverend Hopkins riding in from Eagle Station to perform the ceremony. The children stood as witnesses, Frederick solemn as a judge, the twins barely containing their excitement, Daniel proudly bearing the simple gold band Sam had purchased, and Charlotte scattering pine needles instead of flower petals because real flowers were months away. Emmett and his sister Martha provided additional witness, along with the neighboring families whose children attended Faith School. The celebration afterward was simple but joyous, with Faith's best pies and a cake Martha had baked specially for the occasion. That night, after the guests had departed and the children were settled in their beds in what was now their room in the main house, the cabin to be converted to a proper schoolhouse come spring, Faith stood in the bedroom that was now hers and Sam's, nervous as a girl despite being a widow with 5 children. Sam entered quietly, closing the door behind him. I can sleep in the spare room, he offered immediately, sensing her tension. Until you're ready. Faith shook her head, stepping toward him. That won't be necessary. Their first kiss was tentative, a gentle exploration that quickly deepened into something more urgent. Faith discovered that years of loneliness and duty had not diminished her capacity for passion, and Sam proved to be as considerate and attentive a lover as he was a partner in all other aspects. Later, lying in the circle of his arms with her head on his chest, Faith marveled at the unexpected turns her life had taken. 6 months ago, she had been a desperate widow crying by a riverbank. Now she was the wife of a good man, her children were safe and thriving, and the future once so bleak stretched before her full of promise. What are you thinking? Sam murmured against her hair. That sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms, she replied, tracing idle patterns on his chest. When you found me by the river that day, I thought my life was over. I couldn't see any way forward. And now, she raised herself on one elbow to look into his eyes. Now I can see forever. Spring came to the Colorado high country in fits, and starts warm days followed by sudden snowstorms, the land gradually shedding its white mantle to reveal tender green shoots beneath. Faith discovered she was with child just as the first wildflowers bloomed across the meadows. Sam's joy at the news was tempered only by concern for her health, but Faith blossomed through her pregnancy, finding this experience far different from her previous ones. Where James had been impatient with her limitations during pregnancy, Sam was attentive to her every need while never treating her as an invalid. The children received the news with varying reactions. Frederick, now 12, maintained a studied nonchalance but secretly confided in Emmett his pride at the prospect of another sibling to protect. The twins immediately began planning all the things they would teach the baby. Daniel was initially confused, but warmed to the idea when Sam explained he would be a big brother just like Frederick. Only Charlotte showed any distress, suddenly clingy and prone to tantrums. She's afraid of losing her place, Faith explained one evening as Sam gently rocked the sobbing toddler to sleep. She's been the baby for so long. Sam pressed a kiss to Charlotte's curls. No one could ever replace you, little one, he whispered. You're our special Charlotte. As Faith's belly grew rounder, so did their happiness. The former foreman's cabin was converted into a proper schoolhouse with new benches and a larger blackboard. The school continued to flourish, now with 12 students from surrounding ranches and even a few from town whose parents valued education enough to arrange transportation. Word of Victor Harlow's pursuit gradually faded. Whether he had given up the search or found other prey was unclear, but the shadow he had cast over Faith's new life slowly dissipated. Still, they remained cautious, the children instructed never to speak of their past to strangers, and Faith rarely ventured into Eagle Station. Summer brought long, golden days filled with ranch work and domestic contentment. Sam expanded the vegetable garden behind the house, building raised beds that Faith could tend without excessive bending. Frederick, under Emmett's guidance, became skilled enough with horses to help with the younger stock. The twins discovered a talent for chicken keeping, taking over the management of the small flock with surprising competence. Daniel revealed an unexpected gift for storytelling, entertaining the family on summer evenings with elaborate tales of his own invention. And Charlotte, finally secure in her place in the family, blossomed into a mischievous 3-year-old who followed Sam everywhere, helping with his chores in her own determined way. On a warm August evening, as thunderheads built over the distant mountains promising a cooling rain, Faith went into labor. Martha was summoned from her home in Leadville to assist, arriving just as Faith's pains intensified. Sam paced the porch, alternating between calm reassurances to the worried children and barely concealed anxiety of his own. "Pa," Frederick said, the title still new but fitting comfortably on his tongue. "Is Ma going to be all right?" Sam pulled the boy into a brief, fierce hug. "Your mother is the strongest woman I know. She'll be fine." As darkness fell and rain began to patter against the roof, Faith's cries grew more frequent. Sam sent the younger children to bed with Emmett to watch over them, but Frederick refused to leave, maintaining a silent vigil beside his stepfather. Just before midnight, a new cry pierced the night, the indignant wail of a newborn taking their first breath. Sam and Frederick looked at each other, identical expressions of relief washing over their faces. Minutes later, Martha appeared at the bedroom door, her face wreathed in smiles despite her exhaustion. "Come meet your son, Sam, and your little brother, Frederick." The baby was perfect, red-faced and squalling, with a shock of dark hair and his father's cleft chin. Faith, tired but radiant, cradled him as Sam approached the bed with reverent steps. "He's beautiful," Sam whispered, gently touching the infant's tiny hand. "Like his mother." Faith smiled up at him. "I thought we might call him William after your father, William Samuel Ryder." Sam's eyes filled with tears. "It's perfect." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, gathering his wife and newborn son close. "You're perfect." Frederick hung back by the door until Faith beckoned him closer. "Come see your brother, Frederick. He'll need you to teach him everything." The boy approached cautiously, his expression softening as he looked at the tiny face. "Hello, William," he said solemnly. "I'm your big brother." The next morning, the other children were allowed in to meet their new sibling. The twins cooed and fussed, already planning matching blankets they would knit under Martha's tutelage. Daniel regarded the baby with solemn curiosity, asking practical questions about feeding and diapering that made the adults exchange amused glances. Charlotte approached last, climbing onto the bed with Faith's permission and peering uncertainly at the bundle in her mother's arms. "This is your baby brother, Charlotte," Faith explained gently. "His name is William." Charlotte studied the infant for a long moment before pronouncing, "He's very small." "You were that small once," Sam told her, lifting her onto his lap. "Will you still love me even though you have a new baby?" Charlotte asked with a child's directness. Sam hugged her close. "We will always love you, Charlotte. Having William doesn't change that one bit. Our hearts just grow bigger to love him too." Satisfied, Charlotte leaned forward to place a clumsy kiss on the baby's forehead. "I will be a good big sister," she declared. And so William Samuel Ryder joined the family, completing a circle that had begun with a chance encounter by a river. Faith often marveled at how completely her life had transformed from despair to joy, from loneliness to love, from uncertainty to security. 1 year to the day after Sam had found Faith crying by the Eagle River, they returned to that spot together. William was asleep in Faith's arms, and the other children were exploring the riverbank under Emmett's watchful eye. "Do you remember that day?" Faith asked, leaning against Sam's shoulder as they sat on the very boulder where she had wept. "Every moment," Sam replied, his arm tightening around her waist. "You were so proud even in your desperation, and you were so kind even to a stranger." Sam turned to face her. "Best decision I ever made, stopping to help a crying mother by the river." Faith smiled, touching his weathered cheek. "And the best twist of fate that brought me to you." Together they watched their children play along the same waters that had once carried Faith's tears away. Frederick was showing Daniel how to skip stones across the current. The twins had fashioned fishing poles from sticks and string and were giggling as they dangled them in the shallows. Charlotte was carefully collecting pretty pebbles in her apron, bringing the best ones to Emmett for approval. "They're all thriving," Sam observed. "Frederick's turning into a fine young man. Thanks in large part to you," Faith said. "He needed a father who believed in him." "And I needed a son to believe in," Sam replied simply. "All of them, really. They filled a hole in my life I didn't even know was there." William stirred against Faith's chest, blinking awake with his father's blue eyes. Sam gently touched the baby's cheek. "And this little one, he's our bridge, isn't he, between your first family and our new one?" "They're all our family now," Faith corrected softly. "No divisions, no steps, no halves, just ours," Sam nodded, understanding. "Ours." As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the river valley, Sam helped Faith to her feet. "We should head back before dark." Faith took one last look at the river that had witnessed her lowest moment and now her greatest joy. "Thank you," she whispered, not to Sam but to whatever twist of fate had brought them together. "For what?" Sam asked, not catching her meaning. Faith smiled, shifting William to one arm so she could take Sam's hand with her free one. "For sitting beside me until the tears were gone." Hand in hand, they called the children to them and started the journey home, not just to a house or a ranch, but to the life they had built together, one day at a time, from the ashes of despair to the heights of joy, united by love that had found them when they least expected it but needed it most. And as they crested the ridge that revealed the broken R spread out before them, bathed in the golden light of sunset, Faith knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just shelter or security, but her true home in this place, with these children, and most of all, with the quiet cowboy who had stopped by a river to dry a stranger's tears and ended up healing her heart.